Hi, imagine that you have an incredible photographic memory and mathematical abilities. Do you think you would have been guaranteed a brilliant career and success? Alas, not everything is so simple. This guy named Will Hunting, for example, has not yet managed to find a use for his unique talent, but soon everything will change a lot. 20-year-old Will works at a prestigious place, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Here's just one caveat. Instead of teaching classes in higher mathematics, the guy scrubs university corridors, and in the evenings he chills in bars with friends. One day, Will notices a board with a difficult task in the hallway. She was placed there by a local mathematics professor, Gerald Lambeau. He promised whoever proved the theorem before the end of the semester publication in the university bulletin and his immense respect. All day long, Will can't get the task out of his head. He even dumps his best friend Chuck in a bar and rushes to his backwater house to devote the whole evening to solving the theorem, and the guy succeeds. After a couple of days, the professor finds an anonymous solution on the blackboard. He can't believe that one of his students coped with the most difficult theorem so quickly, and he can't wait to find out who this genius is. Will is still hanging out with friends, when suddenly the guys drive past a company that insults a girl. Will knows the ringleader. This is the guy who bullied him in kindergarten. He asks his friend to stop the car and gets out. Without thinking twice, Hunting hits an old acquaintance right in the face, and a brawl ensues between the two companies. When the cops arrive at the scene, the friends try to pull Will away from the enemy, but it's too late. The guy not only falls into the hands of the police, but also resists. He is being arrested. Professor Lambeau is giving another lecture and is still trying to find out who proved the theorem. There is still no answer. Then he gives students an even more difficult task that he and his colleagues have been trying to solve for more than 2 years. Meanwhile, Will gets out of prison before the court session and begins to solve this task. Lambeau tries to catch up with Will, whom he mistook for a vandal, but he quickly disappears. Then the professor returns to the blackboard and realizes that the correct answer is written on it again. After work, Hunting goes to a bar with friends and tells them that he was cut, but Chuck tries to meet two beauties, posing as a student of a prestigious university, but he is ridiculed by a local smart guy. Will comes to the aid of a friend and puts the nerd in his place. One of the girls, Skylar, pays attention to him and leaves her phone. Meanwhile, Professor Lambeau is determined to find the mysterious genius. He comes to the business office and finds out the name of their former employee, Will Hunting. Later, he goes to a court hearing, where Will defends himself with the help of brilliant knowledge of law and sociology, but because of the large number of convictions, he is still sent to prison. After some time, a visitor comes to Will. This is Professor Lambeau, who reports that the judge has agreed to release the guy under his guarantee. There are only two conditions. Firstly, the young man must meet with the professor every week and study higher mathematics. Secondly, he must also meet with a psychotherapist once a week. Will is sure that he does not need any therapy, but still agrees to the deal. The guy goes to meetings with the professor with pleasure. Will easily copes with any tasks and Lambeau is very pleased with him, but everything is not going so smoothly in therapy. Will drives the first psychologist to white heat with remarks about his book. The second is reproached for the method of hypnosis. The rest gets sarcasm and jokes. After trying as many as 5 first-class specialists, Lambeau almost gives up and decides to send the ward to his fellow student, Sean McGuire. He seems to be the one who can handle this task. During the first session, Will behaves as usual, fidgeting and mocking. However, Sean does not succumb to his provocations. Even when a guy says that the picture that the therapist painted is complete nonsense, the psychologist does not lose his composure. Only when a guy is interested in his wife and starts picking at this topic, noticing that he has found a sore spot, Sean can't stand it. After the end of the session, Professor Lambeau sees that his friend is upset. He tells Sean that he can refuse, but the therapist tells him to bring the guy to him in a week. Meanwhile, Will goes on a date with a girl, Skylar, from a bar. She says that she inherited a lot of money from her father and now plans to go to Stanford University. The couple spends a great evening, at the end of which they kiss in a diner. The day of the second session comes. Sean decides to spend it not in the office, but on a park bench. Will starts to be ironic again, but the therapist interrupts him. He tells the guy that he thought a lot about his words and now he has something to say. In Sean's eyes, the young man is still a little boy who knows nothing about real life. He can learn facts about all the artists of the world, but he has never left Boston and has not seen their creations with his own eyes. He may quote a work about the war, but he has never been on the battlefield. He can recite sonnets about love by heart, but he has never really loved and was not vulnerable to a woman. But most importantly, Sean himself will also not learn anything about the experiences of an abandoned orphan until Will opens up to him. At the next meeting, Will is silent for an hour, but Sean is calm. He is sure that the guy is just testing him for strength and turns out to be right. At the next session, Will still breaks the silence and tells the psychologist a dirty joke. They have a conversation about relationships with girls and Will casually tells them that he recently went on a date. Sean wonders if the guy plans to date Skylar again and will make an unexpected confession. According to him, he does not want to destroy the image of the ideal girl that has formed in his head. The therapist objects. It seems to him that in fact the guy is afraid to destroy his own ideal image. However, this is exactly the meaning of a love relationship, he says. The psychologist says that his own wife died of cancer not so long ago and shares her funny quirks. It is them, according to the therapist, that he now lacks the most, and real intimacy is based on accepting each other's imperfections. Will listens to the words and comes to Skylar's dorm. She is surprised by his appearance because the guy hasn't called for a long time, but agrees to a date. A couple goes to a dog race and have a great time. The girl asks Hunting where and how he grew up. Will says he's in Boston, but he's lying about his family. The guy for some reason comes up with a crazy story about 12 older brothers. Worse, he has to promise Skylar that he will introduce her to his family soon. The sessions with Sean, meanwhile, are going on as usual. At the next meeting, the guy asks the therapist when he realized that his wife is the one. Sean says he knew it at a glance. He tells the young man an amazing story of how he once got tickets to a unique baseball game, but did not go to it because he met a beautiful girl in a bar. Skylar continues to insist on getting to know Will's family, and he still does not dare to tell the truth, so he decides to at least introduce her to his friends, led by Chuck. Contrary to his expectations, the girl fits perfectly into the kids' company, joking and drinking beer with everyone. However, at the end of the evening, Chuck spoils Will's mood. He says that as soon as the girlfriend finds out the whole truth about the guy, she will immediately throw him out like garbage. Professor Lambeau meets with Sean at the diner to find out how the therapy is progressing. He's not really interested in Will's relationship with his past. It is much more interesting for the mentor to find out how the guy is about his future under his protectorate. Sean replies to this that he will not put pressure on the young man and he must choose what he wants from life. The professor gets angry and says that he has already brought Will to the right people anyway, but he doesn't know yet that Chuck went to meet the right people, who behaves completely obscenely and breaks the deal. Meanwhile, Will is enjoying romance in the company of Skylar, but she suddenly breaks his serenity with an unexpected proposal. She calls him to California where they plan to study. The guy immediately refuses, coming up with a million excuses, but Skylar insists. She is convinced that Will is just stuck in his little world where he has no competitors and is afraid of the new. Then the guy boils up. He is sure that Skylar is just playing with him and he will always be just an affair for her because he is poor. The girl tells him in her heart that if she could choose between a living father and his inheritance, she would certainly choose the former. She's scared too, but she chooses to be honest with Will, and he doesn't. The young man objects, but then Skylar remembers about his non-existent brothers. As a result, Will loses his temper completely. He starts shouting that the girl really would not want to know the truth about him, because he is an orphan who was beaten and tortured all his childhood. Skylar, in tears, assures him that she would like to know everything about him, including the most intimate, and then confesses her love to him. But Will's heart is already closed. Will meets with Professor Lambeau, who is unhappy with what happened at a meeting with business partners and scolds the ward for frivolity. Will is boiling up. He says that he is not sure how much he needs this scientific career at all, and communication with the professor is a torment, because his mind is many times less sharp than his own. Lambeau says he expected Will to at least thank him. They quarrel and the guy leaves. After some time, he is invited to an interview at the National Security Agency, where they promise mountains of gold and an amazing job. Will also refuses this opportunity, because he does not want to ruin the lives of ordinary people for the sake of someone's geopolitical ambitions. Soon he meets Sean again. The therapist asks if the guy has a friend to talk to and if he is lonely. Will lists great thinkers like Kant and Nietzsche, and the therapist reminds him again that real relationships can only be built with real people. When asked what Will really wants from life, he starts saying all sorts of nonsense. It's like I wouldn't mind laying bricks and working as a shepherd for the rest of my life. Sean realizes that the guy is just mocking and does not want to be honest with him and himself and throws the guy out of the office with a scandal. Time passes, Skylar flies to California, and Will works at a construction site with a check. A friend asks the guy what he is going to do next. Will replies that he's not going to spend his whole life solving stupid equations and being a lab rat. He plans to stay in Boston and hang out with his best friend for the rest of his life, but suddenly Chuck doesn't like this plan at all. The guy honestly lays out to Will that he behaves like a moron once he decided to squander his talent. Moreover, Chuck admits that every day he dreams of coming to Will's house before work and seeing that his friend finally got out of this hole. Lambeau, meanwhile, learns that Will has stopped going to therapy with Sean. The professor threatens to tell the judge about it and accuses the therapist of pushing the guy into the path of a juvenile delinquent. Sean replies that his friend doesn't give a damn about the feelings of a guy who has been lonely for all 20 years of his life and still hasn't learned to accept love, but Lambeau doesn't listen to him. He's getting paranoid. Now he is sure that Sean is just taking revenge on him for his successes. The therapist can't believe his ears. This smug fool really thinks that Sean is jealous of him. Sean says that he only cares about the fate and true desires of Will, whom Lambo may one day humiliate in the same way and make him feel like a loser. It is at this moment that Will enters the office. Lambo quietly leaves, leaving the guy alone with the psychologist. Sean explains to Hunting that his quarrel with the professor does not relate to him personally, it's just that he and Lambo have a long history. Changing the subject, the therapist informs that he has prepared a report on the young man for the judge. Will asks if there have been many like him in Sean's practice. Suddenly, the young man finds out that Sean himself lived in similar conditions. His father was an alcoholic who beat him constantly. The therapist repeats several times to Will that he is not to blame for what happened to him. At first he tries to show off, but then he does not hold back and gives free rein to emotions. Soon Will comes back to Sean for the last session. He tells the therapist that he still went to work for one of the companies where the professor recommended him and is satisfied with his choice. In response, Sean says that he decided to travel a little and leaves him his number. Later in the evening, Will goes to celebrate his birthday with friends and receives a car as a gift, which Chuck and his friends assembled from used spare parts. Before leaving, Sean is visited by Professor Lambo. They apologize to each other and decide to have a drink at the bar. At the same time, Chuck, as usual, picks up Will at his house and discovers that his friend has left. The guy is happy as in his old dreams, and Will manages to leave a letter in Sean's mailbox. The therapist opens it and finds out that the guy postponed his job at the company and went to California for a girl. In the letter, he uses the same phrase that Sean used when he told friends that he would not go to baseball because of a meeting with his future wife.